Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, our goal is to dive into the biggest global stories with a fresh perspective, and today we have a big topic. What's really happening in China right now? Workers are taking to the streets, Trump's tariffs are rocking the economy, and the Chinese Communist Party is doing everything it can to keep it all under wraps. Is China teetering on the edge of a major crisis, or is the government's iron grip strong enough to hold it together? Grab a snack, smash that like button, and let's dive in. Stick around to the end. I want to hear what you think in the comments. This video is a mix of hard facts, some unconfirmed rumors, and speculation based on China's history. We'll cover protests, censorship, the economic fallout, and how far the Communist Party might go to stay in control. All our sources are listed in the description, so you can check them out. Let's get started with what we know for sure. Imagine standing outside a factory with hundreds of others chanting, "Pay our wages." That's the scene playing out across China right now, from Dao County in Hunan to Suining in Sichuan and Tongliao in Inner Mongolia. These aren't just random outbursts. Workers haven't been paid in months, and they're desperate. Radio Free Asia reported on April 30th, 2025, that at Guangxin Sports Goods in Hunan, hundreds of workers went on strike after their factory shut down without paying them. In Tongliao, things got so bad that some climbed onto rooftops, threatening to jump if they didn't get their money. Near Shanghai, Red State noted on May 2nd, 2025, that thousands protested outside a LED lighting factory, demanding wages owed since January. This isn't just about one or two factories. China's economy, the world's factory for decades, is stumbling. The New York Times, on April 15th, 2025, said manufacturing is shrinking fast, and small businesses, the heart of China's growth, are collapsing left and right. In Guangdong, the industrial powerhouse, unemployment among factory workers hit 6.5%, according to a source we reviewed. That's millions of people out of work, and it's not just them. When factories close, entire towns suffer. Workers stop buying groceries, shops lose customers, and families struggle to pay rent. It's a domino effect, and it's spreading. These protests are more than just demands for cash. They're a sign that people are losing trust in the system. For years, the Chinese government promised jobs and prosperity if people stayed loyal and kept quiet. But now, with factories dark and paychecks missing, that deal is starting to feel like a lie. Workers are angry, and they're not just whispering, they're shouting in the streets. But when they do, the government doesn't exactly send out negotiators. They send something else. So, how does the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, deal with these protests? They don't sit down for a friendly chat. Police show up fast, often in riot gear, and they mean business. In Suining, workers demanding unpaid wages were met with batons and arrests, according to Radio Free Asia. Some reports, like one we found, even claim protesters were shoved into unmarked vans and driven away. That's not a welcome wagon. That's a crackdown. But the CCP's real power isn't just in the streets. It's online. They've built a censorship machine that works like a well-oiled factory, churning out silence. The New York Times reported in January 2024 that posts about economic troubles vanish from Chinese social media like Weibo in seconds. Words like protest, tariff, or even unemployment are blocked. Freedom House, in a July 2023 report, said China employs thousands of people to monitor the internet, scrubbing anything that makes the government look bad. Videos of workers chanting? Gone. Comments about factory closures? Deleted. It's like the protests never happened. This censorship doesn't stop at China's borders. The CCP targets foreign platforms too. Index on Censorship, in April 2025, reported that Chinese bots flood YouTube and other sites, downvoting or flagging videos critical of the government. That's why clips of protests, like ones shared by Omar yesterday Big Cat on X, are so hard to find. They're buried under a digital avalanche. And it's not just tech tricks. Journalists who try to tell the truth face real danger. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission noted in 2024 that reporters in China can be detained or even disappeared for covering sensitive stories. Protesters aren't safe either. Some just vanish after speaking out. though hard proof is tough to come by. The CCP's goal is simple: control the narrative. They want the world and their own people to see a strong, united China, not a country where workers are desperate. But keeping that image shiny isn't easy when the reality is so messy. Let's zoom in on why these factories are closing. A huge factor is the trade war with the US, especially the tariffs President Trump slapped on Chinese goods. The Guardian reported on April 10, 2025, that the US raised tariffs to 125% on some Chinese imports, hitting everything from electronics to clothing. China fired back with its own tariffs, but they're feeling the heat. Factories that shipped goods to the US are seeing orders dry up overnight. Bloomberg on April 28, 2025, said these tariffs could cut China's economic growth by 0.6% through 2027. That's millions of jobs at risk. Goldman Sachs estimated up to 16 million workers could be affected. A source we looked at claimed China's exports dropped 8% in 2024, the biggest fall in a decade. We don't have official numbers yet, but Reuters has reported a slowdown, so it's plausible. This isn't just about money, it's about livelihoods. When a factory loses its US customers, it can't pay workers, and those workers end up in the streets. It's a vicious cycle. Big companies are jumping ship too. Apple, Nike, Samsung, you name it, they're moving out. The source said 20% of iPhones are now made in India, up from just 1% a couple of years ago. That's a massive shift. Vietnam's grabbing electronics contracts, Mexico's building cars for the US market, and even Bangladesh is stitching clothes for the world. Why? These places are cheaper, less controlled, and don't have China's baggage, like strict policies or protest risks. This trend, called China Plus One, means companies keep some factories in China but build new ones elsewhere. For Chinese workers, it's bad news: fewer jobs, more protests, and a government that doesn't want anyone to know. Now let's talk about the stuff that's harder to pin down. There are stories out there that sound wild, but we don't have the receipts to back them up. One claim from the source we reviewed mentioned a protest in a place called Wuentong, at a factory called Sheni Opto Electronics. Workers were supposedly chanting for their wages, but here's the thing. We couldn't find any other reports about this place or protest. It might be a real event with a misspelled name, or it could be a rumor that got out of hand. Without more info, we have to call it unconfirmed. Then there's a bigger claim. In April 2025, a Communist Party official was allegedly beaten to death during a protest, and people celebrated. That's a huge deal, but there's no trace of it in reliable sources like Reuters, BBC, or even Radio Free Asia. On X, a user named Ice Sohai posted on May 2, 2025, about the CCP being nervous about losing control, but nothing about a death. If this happened, it'd be front-page news, so the silence makes it feel more like a tall tale than truth. Another rumor is that these protests are turning into something bigger, not just about wages, but about democracy and freedom. The source suggested workers are starting to demand political change, like they did in 1989. That's a massive shift, but verified reports from Radio Free Asia and Red State stick to economic complaints, unpaid wages, layoffs, factory closures. If people were chanting for democracy, it'd be a game changer, but we don't have evidence yet. It's possible small groups are whispering about bigger changes, but without videos or eyewitnesses, it's just a guess. These rumors matter because they show how hungry people are for the real story. The CCP's censorship creates a fog where truth and fiction mix. As journalists, we have to be clear. These stories might reflect the mood, but until we get solid proof, they're just shadows, not facts. To figure out what the CCP might do next, let's take a trip through history. The Chinese government has faced protests before, and they've got a playbook for handling them. Let's start with the big one, Tiananmen Square, 1989. Students, workers, and intellectuals protested for democracy in Beijing. The government didn't negotiate, they sent tanks. Thousands were killed, though the exact number is still a state secret. The CCP didn't just crush the movement, they erased it. Tiananmen is barely mentioned in China today, and online searches for it are blocked, as Human Rights Watch has noted. Then there's Hong Kong in 2019. Protests started over a law that would let China extradite people from Hong Kong. It grew into a massive push for democracy. The CCP didn't use tanks this time, but they cracked down hard. Police fired tear gas, arrested thousands, and passed laws to silence dissent. Many activists were jailed or fled, according to BBC reports from 2020. The message was the same: challenge the party and you'll regret it. More recently, in 2022, China's COVID lockdowns pushed people to the edge. Protesters in cities like Shanghai waved blank sheets of paper, a silent way to say we're done. The CCP responded with arrests, phone tracking, and internet blackouts. Human Rights Watch reported that dozens were detained and some disappeared. These protests fizzled out, partly because the government loosened some rules, but mostly because they controlled the narrative. What do these moments teach us? The CCP doesn't like to lose. They use force, censorship, and propaganda to stay on top. They've gotten smarter over time, too. In 1989, they needed soldiers. Now, they've got facial recognition, AI surveillance, and a digital firewall that blocks bad news before it spreads. The Financial Times on April 29, 2025, mentioned a new CCP campaign blaming the US for China's economic woes, calling America a stranded boat. That's straight out of their playbook: shift the blame and rally the people. So, what might the CCP do with these protests? Let's speculate based on history and what's happening now. There are three paths they could take, and each has its own risks. The CCP could go old school, like Tiananmen, and use maximum force. Picture military trucks, mass arrests, and maybe even gunfire. They've got the tools. Index on Censorship reported in April 2025 that China's rolling out digital ID cards to track everyone, and their surveillance tech is top-notch. A hard crackdown would shut protests down fast, but it's risky. The world's watching. Cell phone videos could leak, sparking outrage or new sanctions. Plus, with millions unemployed, using force might just make people angrier. If workers feel they've got nothing to lose, things could spiral. This is the CCP's go-to move these days, and it's more likely. They'd mix small concessions with heavy control. For example, The Independent reported on April 8, 2025, that China's offering subsidies for things like electronics to boost the economy. They might pay some overdue wages or promise jobs to calm workers down. But behind the scenes, they'd double down on censorship, block more keywords, delete videos, and arrest protest leaders. Propaganda would go into overdrive too. The Conversation on April 22, 2025, noted that China's using TikTok-style campaigns to push patriotic vibes, like K-pop-inspired bands. This worked in 2022. A few carrots, a big stick, and the protests faded. This is the wild card, and it's unlikely but possible. If protests grow, say millions march in Beijing or Shanghai, demanding not just wages but democracy, it could overwhelm the CCP. The transcript hinted at this, saying workers might want freedom. Tiananmen started small, and Hong Kong's protests snowballed fast. If workers, students, and the middle class team up, it'd be tough to stop. But the CCP's built a fortress against this. Surveillance, police, and propaganda are stronger than ever. Still, if the economy tanks harder, say, exports drop 15% instead of 8%, desperation could change the game. A single spark, like a viral video of police brutality, could light a fire. Here's the million-dollar question. Can the CCP hide this crisis? They're pros at it. The Great Firewall blocks foreign news, and they control every TV channel and newspaper in China. The transcript talked about clandestine videos leaking out, and we've seen a few on X, but they're rare. Most Chinese people probably don't know how bad things are, thanks to censorship. The government's so good at this that even big protests, like Hong Kong's, barely make a dent in mainland news. But cracks are showing. People use VPNs to dodge the firewall, and workers are reaching out to foreign media like Radio Free Asia to share their stories. The more protests spread, the harder it is to hide them. In 2019, Hong Kong's movement went global because of smartphones and X. Today, one viral clip could break through. On X, posts like J83214566 on May 1st, 2025 say the CCP's desperate to keep protests secret, but word's getting out. Then there's the CCP's counter-propaganda. They're spinning hard, blaming Trump's tariffs for everything. The Financial Times said they're pushing a narrative that the US is a stranded boat, while China's the steady ship. They're also pumping out feel-good content, like patriotic music videos, to distract people, as the conversation noted. It's clever, but it's not bulletproof. When families can't buy food or pay rent, propaganda starts sounding hollow. If the economy keeps sliding, the CCP's story might not hold. So, where's China headed? The facts paint a rough picture. Factories are closing, workers are protesting, and Trump's tariffs are hitting hard. The CCP's fighting back with censorship, arrests, and propaganda, but the pressure's building. Rumors of dead officials or demands for democracy might be overblown, but they show how tense things are. History says the CCP will do whatever it takes, force, lies, maybe worse, to stay in power. But in 2025, with the world watching and the economy shaky, it's not as easy as it was in 1989. Could this be China's breaking point? Not yet, probably. The CCP's got a tight grip, and they've survived storms before. But the cracks are real. If protests spread or the economy dives deeper, things could get ugly. The world's waking up to the fact that China's not the unstoppable factory it used to be. Countries like India and Vietnam are stealing the spotlight, and China's influence is starting to wobble. This isn't just a Chinese story. It's a global shift, and we're all watching it unfold. All right, that's the deep dive on China's crisis. What do you think? Can the CCP keep this under wraps, or are we seeing the start of something bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, so let's get the conversation going. If you found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button with the bell so you don't miss our next story. We've got more global news coming your way, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.